Hi, I'm Dave.
Hi, I'm Michael.
And this is D&M. Welcome back.
Good to have you here again, Dave. Always good to sit with you, mate.
Good to see you, Mike.
Wherever you are for tuning in and listening, we appreciate that. So thank you for taking the time out to spend some time with us. Today's subject, and maybe a bit of a disclaimer here at the start too, we are talking about parenting and the journey of going from the child to becoming a parent yourself. We'll try and pack all this into the hour as best we can. And also then themes of loss as well might be in there. So just be aware that there's going to be some of those subjects that might be a little bit raw or sensitive for people. And with D&M, we are going to be doing sort of music, movies, life, love and everything in between. And this episode is a bit more about the deep and meaningful stuff. And I guess to kick off, we're going to be talking about parenting. Do you have a memory of when you first understood, Dave? I guess we all go through it, right? There's a period where your parents are like gods on earth and they can do no wrong. They're your provider and they keep you safe and they are the centerpiece of your world. There is a period where you start to become aware of your own sense of self and you start to see them as people and start to understand them as just human beings who are doing the best they can. What were your early years like, and did you get to, when do you think you started to get to an understanding of, oh, these are just two people that have had their own journeys?
That didn't come till a long time later, after I started realising I was on my own journey.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it's all about, regardless. Some people unfortunately maybe never knew their parents or had lost them early, but we're essentially talking about the people who influence you and raised you, and if it's relatives or friends or whoever, this is what it's all about. Now, my parenting, I now have the ability to understand. At the time, I just thought it was normal, what it was like, and it was fairly normal for most of the people that grew up around my age. Understanding that my parents grew up in a completely different age, an age of war, no technology, difficult times, depression with my father. He was born in the Depression. That's how old my father was. So everybody has their difficulties. And again, speaking of this, if you're a younger person and you think, oh, where's this going? It's not really relating to me. Bear in mind that I now tell my son, who's just turned 19, that the world has changed, especially when 2020 hit. And I said to him, wow, this is a new decade for you. You're 18, turning 18 in the year 2020. This is going to be the best decade of your life. Get ready, pay attention, listen to your soundtrack, your movies, watch your fashions change. Because from turning 18 in 2020, wow. I put everything into decades. And he went, yeah, you're right. He told his mates. And unfortunately, COVID hit. Yeah. Bushfires were terrible at the beginning of 2020. There was climate, there was doom and gloom. And then COVID hit, and he has celebrated his 18th birthday during lockdown. Yeah. Pubs and clubs. So if I'm going to be talking about things here and you're a younger person going, everybody be aware of your own story, because you're all going to be going through stuff. We're going to talk now about how we dealt with stuff. You'll probably deal with it differently, but we're all going to deal with it. So my parents, I think they grew up with not much love coming from their parents. So we didn't get tremendous amounts of love from them. In the later years, my sisters and I have gone on to have our own families, and thankfully the pattern changed.
In that space though, I think, just to stay in there for a minute, I think as I've gotten older, I've got to understand that, we are usually the products of our environment and our experiences, right? We are the sum of those things. And you don't know that when you're a kid. But you said something a moment ago about, not necessarily feeling that nurture or that love. And sometimes I think that's not even a conscious thing for most people, that they're not even aware that they're not giving you that thing that you need. And when you start to understand their journey, you can give them a little more slack. I remember understanding as I got older, because I know we can talk about your dad in a moment, because your dad was police, my dad was Air Force. And when I got to understand that mums from that same generation your parents were from, mum's mother had died relatively young from cancer. She was only a young girl herself, and Dad doesn't really know how to cope, so he has a really hard time and kind of detaches and ends up placing her in an orphanage. So she eventually gets out of the orphanage in time and has to discover who she is. Dad has his father leave, so he never gets to know him or see who he is. And then when he hits 20, 21, his mother suddenly passes away. So he's kind of lost, and she was the centre of his universe. There was no dad. So he joins the forces, Mum's joined the force, they meet. And then, so now you've got two people who've not really been nurtured in a complete loving environment, surrounded by love and compassion and empathy and support, who've met and who are now having kids. So they can only do what they can do with the knowledge they have based on what they know. And if they know nothing more than what they know, you then have to make peace, I think, with that as you age yourself and start to understand some of those choices you made, some of those things you may have said or done are a consequence of you not knowing more than what you knew.
Yeah,
You know
that's
what I
good.
mean?
That's good. That's really good.
And that was, for me, in a snapshot, how I eventually was able to better have a relationship with them as I got older, by understanding that. Because for the longest time it was hard to let go of stuff, you know, because we all carry our stuff.
Absolutely.
You know. But when you were growing up, was Dad present? Because with that job, I imagine he was all over the place. I know my dad was getting pulled to and fro.
No. Well, growing up, see, it was very similar with my mum and dad. Dad had one sister, which was unusual back in those days, just the two kids. And his father went to New Guinea and fought in World War II. His mum stayed home during very, very tough times. And when his father came home, like every man who comes home from war, he had malaria and turned to alcohol to get away from his thoughts and memories. Mum was one of 7 kids.
Wow.
And her mum ran away. She was living with her father, and the authorities came and took them to an orphanage. Same thing, very same thing. So that's why they weren't brought up understanding love. And then as a kid, I think we're all the same as humans. Kids don't know really what love is. And I guess everybody wants more. So they're at the shops, kids want lollies. Then I go, can I get that toy? If a parent buys them everything, do they love them? It's for little kids don't know what. So we're not really sure what we want from our parents as far as what love is. That's something that takes a while to figure out. Dad worked a lot. He worked a lot. He left before the sun come up and come home at sunset.
Can we just get into what was he doing though?
He was in fingerprints.
Forensics, is that right?
Forensics, yeah. He was a fingerprint expert in Sydney.
Yeah.
And that is what he did. So
Yeah.
he would work Monday to Friday. Then on Saturday and Sunday he would work on the car, mow the lawns, go fishing, walk the dog. And even as a young kid, I remember walking the dog with him some days, and he would tell me about his week, tell me about the things and the people he had to fingerprint to try and identify them. I don't want to go too deep.
Yeah.
But I remember as a child walking alongside him, looking up at him, thinking, I don't think I should be hearing this.
Yeah.
Now I can look back and go, I was his outlet. He would tell me stuff because he had to get it out of him. So we'd walk the dogs and he would tell me stories. Mum was pretty much home a lot when we were little, and then she went off and got work as well, just at the local hospital. She did work at a toy shop earlier on, but so it was really my older sisters and me, 2 older sisters. We were the significant ones around each other all the time, and we fought, and my eldest sister looked after us and made sure we were bathed by the time Mum got home, and she did a lot of the cooking to make sure that it was okay. And so they were very distant but still loving, very protective. Dad was very protective. Now I can see, understandably, because of what he witnessed.
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed often to go out or to go far and play with kids. And I would wonder why, when my friends were all out doing these great things, but as a young kid I wasn't allowed to do it. That was Dad's fear. I played a lot of sporting events. I played basketball, I played football, I played twice at the Sydney Cricket Ground, and my family came and watched me. Everybody except my father. Now, I played before Australia-France under lights at the Sydney Cricket Ground for my high school, and Dad didn't come. And I realise now, because he lived in fear of us being hurt. And I accept that, and I don't mind that.
You don't know it at the time though, right?
No, but I didn't question it either.
No.
Dad, do you want to come? No, I don't want to go. No, your father won't go, Mum would say. And that was it. I didn't question it. I didn't think about it. Of course, years later, you start to think, why? Why didn't you come?
Yeah.
But now I know why. I can see it from his point of view. He was in fear of seeing me getting hurt. He didn't want that. Because he'd seen too much pain in life with his job.
Was he able to explain that to you?
No.
Or you got to figure that out?
I figured that out. Dad being in the police as a young boy, I was always going to follow in my father's footsteps.
Yeah.
There was a period of time when you could finish year 10 and go into the police cadets in Sydney, straight from year 10, go into the police cadets and that was your pathway. That ended a couple of years before I hit year 10. Then it became all you need was your HSC and you can go to the police academy, just finish your year 12, called the HSC back then. So I did that, and the year I did that, they said, no, that's not enough. So for me, that was a good thing, because then I went and did my other things, and not too much encouragement from my dad on that. My mum did a bit. I fell in love with photography. I wanted to be a photographer. Dad would say, they're a dime a dozen. How are you going to make money doing that? I wanted to become an actor. There's a million of them, you know. And have a look at all the names at the end of a movie. How many of them do you know apart from the first one? These are the things Dad would say. Even ultimately when I did say to him, look, I'm going to join the police one day, he said to me, you don't have the discipline. So he wasn't very encouraging to those things.
Just in that space, we've talked about this stuff, and I know we're doing it now, and I don't mean to cut you flow, but what I'm realising too when you tell that story, and for a lot of us, I was keenly aware of it when I became a dad, is that our actions, our words, there's great power in words. Great power in words. And I often say that's why 3 words like I love you carry so much gravity. When you know when you say those 3 words, if you mean it and you tell someone that, it has value. There's only 3 words. Just like if you said I hate you, just 3 words. Words are powerful. And as a kid, your parents are charged with the responsibility of hardwiring your personality, your self-image. You're helping hardwire the way the mind in that being is going to perceive itself in the world. And I remember becoming a dad and realising, just through reading other things and talking to other people and understanding, oh yeah, we are responsible for hardwiring this human being's early sense of self that they'll carry with them their entire life. The child is always inside the adult. And our parents equally were doing that with us, but probably not with that same level of awareness. They're hardwiring us by the things they don't say, or the things they do say.
Actions are important.
Observed behaviour, the things you see.
Actions are really important. Like, people can say I love you, and they are 3 words, and then I love you too is 4. And unless it means something, they do come out as words. I don't remember being told I love you by my parents. It wasn't until as we got older in life and we started having our own kids, my sisters and I, and then we would start saying it. I remember before my father passed, well before he started showing real serious signs of dementia, I remember him in his house one day and I said, I love you, Dad. And he said, I love you too, mate. And then I went and grabbed him and I looked into his eyes and said, Dad, I want to tell you, I really love you. And he realised what I was saying. And he said, I do, I love you too, mate. And we hugged and we're teary. But I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I did that with him. I've done it with my mum as well. I've told her I really love you. Regardless of our past and our ups and downs that we've had growing up, and I have had many. I've had many with my mum as well. But for me, and I tell my kids I love them all the time. I tell my closest friends I love them because I realise now how much of an important feeling that is. Not the word, the feeling. And if someone really deserves it, I'll tell them. And then I'll back it up. And you know, my kids know it, my family knows it, and I think my closest friends know it. I'll do anything I can for you. If you need me, I'm going to be there for you. and that to me is selfless love.
Did
Love is
you
selfless.
absolutely? Did you, if you could say it, what do you think you learnt from either mum or dad? What are some of the take homes, if you start to reflect, for better or for worse, of how they go about doing what they do along their own journey? When you reflect and you go, this quality I can attribute to a learning from him or her. What do you think?
With Dad, it was being aware of nature, because we would walk a lot on weekends, and he would point out to me rock formations, how that formed on the coastline. He'd talk about it and different areas, and why seaweed would grow in one area, not another, and why Kunji, another type of seaweed, would grow there because it needs low tide. He'd explain everything to me. He was like my Attenborough before Attenborough.
Right.
He'd spot a bird, and even if he didn't know it, he knew what type it was, and that does this, that does that, and he'd mimic their sounds beautifully. I've learned all of that
I know,
from him.
yeah, you do that. Yeah.
My son does it now.
Yeah.
Beautifully, he got work experience with a builder, and they were down in the bush somewhere down south.
This is your son?
This is my son, yeah. And that day, the guy he was working for said, "I've never seen a kid so aware of his surroundings in my life."
Yeah.
And I went, "What? Why?" And he said, he kept saying, "Listen to that whipbird. Listen to that.
Yeah.
Wow, how many whipbirds are around?" Because every other kid just comes and does the work, but he was aware of all this stuff going on around him. And I think that's the one thing I've passed on to my kids. And I know my daughters will say, what was the one lesson I ever passed on to you? They'll all say, awareness. Be aware of what's going on around you.
Great gift.
Be aware of the time you're living in.
Yeah.
Be aware of everything that's happening and what you can control and what you can't. Mum and Dad, in their own ways, delivered their lessons. Dad was an awareness of nature. Mum was, again, music. Dad did love his movies. I learnt love of movies from both Mum and Dad. Mum loved the telly and would laugh. Mum's sense of humour. She was very funny. So it was these subtle little things. Never come and sit down, I'm going to show you something. Although Dad did do that with a couple of movies, but it was just, I picked up off them and absorbed what they were doing. And so I chose what I wanted, what I didn't, I blocked. And that influenced me, obviously, and now it flows on, which is the beauty of all of this. Wherever you are in life, if you're a young kid listening to this, you're a child of someone, understand. Be aware of what's going on. Your parents, you can pick and choose whatever you want. You can't pick and choose your rules in life. Unfortunately, that's not the way it works, but you will grow on to be a part of them and the people around you and your friends and your uncles and your aunties and grow. You'll become a parent one day yourself. You'll understand your parents if you don't now. Just flow with it. Flow with it. It's you can't stop it. You can't, be aware of what you can control. What you can control are your thoughts.
Yeah, 100%, mate. That's well said. I remember years ago, mid-30s maybe, I sat down and I'd read somewhere this idea and I thought, oh, what a great idea, I'll do that. And it was, while your parents are in the world, have you told them how you feel? Have you thanked them? Have you broken down the things that they did for you? I wrote Mum and Dad a letter. And I remember going up and handing them the letter. I drove up to where they were living at the time and had them in envelopes. I said, hey, when you get time, don't have to do it now, but here's just a letter from me to you. And I'd been inspired by something I'd seen or read, which was, why do we wait to reflect when things have gone? Why aren't we reflecting while things are here and validating them? So I wrote them a letter. And there's a little part of you that wants the validation too. You want to hear, hey, I read that letter and thank you, it was beautiful. So there's maybe that little selfish thing in there that you're looking for that little bit of recognition. Not that you're aware of it at the time. So I gave them the letters and I'd heard nothing for a week or two. And then when I was next in a phone call with them, I asked, oh, by the way, did you happen to open your letters? And I remember in Mum's letter thanking her for the lesson of being stoic and strong. And even though that was a hard lesson to learn with her, because she can be really strong-willed, but she had to be too, when you understand the story of her getting out of the orphanage, going literally, she told the story to me of being a teenager and getting to Sydney on George Street for the very first time, getting off a bus and standing on a street corner, and underneath this sign that says no standing, she thinks, oh, you're not allowed to stand here. I better keep walking. But she's got no one in her ear telling her how to go. I better find a place to sleep tonight. And she's not even 20. So I remember thanking her for the lesson of being stoic, being resilient. that was how I was able to frame the way that I'd grown up with her. Thanking Dad for the love of music and the love of art. That all came through him. While they never said much to me, I knew they'd read the letter, I knew they had the letters, and that was the most important thing.
Yeah.
You've got the letter, you know how I feel.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to Dad on the phone and saying, did you read your letter? And he goes, yeah, thank you, mate. Were you feeling nostalgic? I laughed. No, I just wanted you to know. All right, mate. Okay. And that was as much as I got back.
Yeah.
But I knew that they knew.
It got through.
It got through.
Yeah.
And I guess that's part of you making peace with your past and the choices they make along the way. Did you get a sense of validation from them as you moved through your life and started to do things and become your own man? Was there a sense of recognition of, well played?
Yeah. And I think I've thanked them as well. And I did say to them, even though they did have strange methods, they did something right. They've got 3 successful kids. None of us have done time in prison or anything, so they've done pretty good out of that. I don't know. It's difficult to say. With Mum and Dad, it's very similar what you're saying about your mum. Dad was quiet. Dad was a copper, but he was quiet. He didn't really clash too much with other people. He would let someone push in front of him at a queue, and my mother wouldn't. She would embarrassingly
call it out,
call people out, excuse me, and just go off. I was the next person here to be served, and you go, oh no. I even remember, I think, and football historians will figure this out, I think it was the final, maybe the grand final. We were at the sports ground in Sydney. It was Western Suburbs versus the Eastern Suburbs, Roosters versus now Balmain West Tigers. Tommy Raudonikis was playing, Russell Fairfax was playing with Eastern Suburbs. My sisters went, they were Russell Fairfax fans because he had long flowing blonde hair. I hated the Roosters because I was a Rabbitoh fan. So I remember standing there next to a fence with my mum, and people were getting drunk all around us. No seating, it was like a mosh pit. And some guy was climbing up a pole to get a better view, and she was grabbing him by the leg and saying, "Get down, you're not supposed to be up there." And nearly getting into a fight with this guy. I remember playing an English schoolboys rugby union team, and a fight broke out on the field, and everybody got involved in this big massive brawl. I find out later on that some of their reserves ran onto the field, which you shouldn't do. You shouldn't run on. On top of that, at the end of the game, my mates were all laughing, saying, "What was your mum doing out there?" I said, "What? Your mum ran out, grabbing their reserves, telling them to get back, sit back. You're not allowed on the field," screaming at them. I'm lucky I didn't see it. I was preoccupied in the fight. But that was Mum. She would just think, no, she would run out. So, yeah, she had a tremendous strength to her, but it was interesting. Memories.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I guess they're making the best choices they can with the knowledge that they have at the time. And I guess it's on you as the child of that to make peace with those decisions and discover the kind of person you want to be as a parent yourself. To maybe jump ahead into that, becoming a dad for you. Yeah. When that was first going to happen, were you aware of the type of dad you wanted to be? And were you aware of the things we've been talking about, that, we are hardwiring personalities as a parent?
I think all of us, once any of us realise we're going to become a parent, it's a special time in your life. If you accept it, if you think, okay, this is it, this is happening, and you decide, well, I'm going to be a father or a mother, you have to approach that now with some serious responsibility. You are responsible for a person coming into the world, and then again, they'll be their own person.
Of course.
They'll definitely be their own person. I've got 3 kids as you have, and they're all 3 completely different personalities. Yeah. However, I am going to be responsible for a lot of who they are. I've got 2 daughters, and then my youngest is my son. And after 2 girls, I was hoping for another girl. And when we found out we were having a boy, I remember reacting poorly.
Let's hope he's not listening.
Oh, I've told him this story.
Right.
I've told him this story.
Yeah.
And my wife at the time said, "Why did you react like that?" Yeah. And I said, "Look, I take the responsibility of parenting, of being a parent, a good father, very seriously. and I think I've done well with 2 girls. However, bringing a man into the world is a little bit different. I'm now raising a man who I'm going to want to be respectful towards women. I don't think my dad really taught me a lot about manhood.
Right. Interesting.
I learnt a lot from mates down the beach and watching people and mates' fathers and stuff. It was a blend. It was a community.
But you had a good observational learning about how daughters are raised because you saw your sisters getting raised.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It was, So I thought, wow, the pressure's on here.
Yeah.
And I'm happy today knowing my son is one of the greatest blokes anybody will meet. This is not just me. Other people who know him speak so highly of him.
Well, I hear you refer to him as your best mate.
Well, he is my best mate.
There you go.
Yeah, he's my mate. All my kids are my best mates, but he's got his own sense of humour. Like, he's 19. He's a man now himself. And
so you were heavily aware of the burden of responsibility of what
pressure.
this is going to, because there's no handbook, right?
Pressure,
As
no.
there wasn't for our parents, and there's no guarantee that your calls, your decisions are all going to be the right ones. In fact, what's more likely is that you're going to be a mixed bag of wins and losses in the way that you do it.
It was the pressure. It was the pressure of parenting. Am I hopefully going to make sure that I give this person everything I can to be successful in life, but also to be able to deal with what life's going to hit you with?
Because as you and I've talked before, we end up becoming their stories. So we end up becoming the story of dad was this or mum was this. And as we're doing now, talking and reflecting a bit about our own parents, we become their stories. And our choices, our actions linger on in them. I can remember sitting down with my eldest boy one afternoon after football training. He had gotten this scholarship to get into a school to play football. He was training with a team that was separate to that experience, and he was only maybe, I think, 12 or 13. And I pick him up from training. He gets in the car and I can tell he's a bit quiet, a bit upset, and we're talking. And I said, what's up? Are you okay? And he starts to cry, gets upset. I said, what's wrong? He said, the guys were teasing me. I said, well, teasing you why? I told them about my scholarship and I told them what I'm doing, and they laughed, and then they started saying, it doesn't mean anything that you got that scholarship. So he must have been a bit older than 13, must have been a bit older than that. And it shook him, because I think I was driving and listening, and I think what he was looking for was, these guys are going to celebrate my win. But he got the opposite, as kids do, right? So I'm listening to him, and I pulled over to the side of the road, and I remember thinking, I'm going to have to land him here. I don't know quite how to do it, but he was really upset. And I said to him, okay, look, let me understand something, buddy. Your friends and their opinion of you is pretty important, isn't it? And through his tears, like, yeah. And I said, okay, and you've got your coach, his opinion of you is pretty important because he's your coach. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And your teachers at school, their opinion of you is important, right? Because they're your teachers. Yeah. I said, I'm your dad. So my opinion of you is pretty important as well, right? He's looking at me, nodding. And I said, but still, none of these are the most important opinions about you. So who's got the most important opinion about you? And I looked at him, and I saw his eyes darting around in his head, and he looked up. And then he looked at me through his tears, and he said, with a question mark, he said, me? I said, yeah, now stop there. That's it. That's all you have to remember. And I said to him, if you only remember one conversation you ever had with Dad, remember this one. That the person who has the most important opinion about you is you. Are you proud of what you've achieved with your sport? Yeah. You're proud of getting the scholarship? Yeah. That's it. The other stuff is noise. So the most valuable opinion about you will be the one you carry. And I still remember saying to him, make sure if you only remember the one thing Dad ever said to you, please remember this one. And then we drove on and we headed home, and I still remember that moment as a key point in my parenting life, where I remember pulling the car over and thinking, I hope I have the right words, because he's hurting.
Yeah.
And I think I found the right words.
I think you got him.
And I still stand by those same words.
I think you got him.
And echo it as they get older. That's something I still go back to. Because that whole thing of, can you be comfortable in the dark when the lights are out with just your mind and the choices you make and the way that you're living your life? Can you do that? And if you can do that, even when the outer world is saying something different, or that you've got wolves at the door and people that would rather see you hurting, can you still find a way to reconcile with who lives inside? I think that's the journey for everybody. Everyone's looking to achieve that, even unconsciously. Can I make peace with me? And I think if you can make peace with you, making peace with those that had big influences on you, either positive or negative, becomes easier to do. Do you know what I mean?
Ever had the joy of your kids repeating something that you've drummed into them? You ever had that? I had that last night.
Did you?
Yeah, last night he was doing something and he said, I'm going to go, he's on antibiotics. And he said, straight after his meal, he said, I have to have my tablet with my food. I said, well, you don't have to have it with your food straight away. You can have it within the hour. And he said, I'm going to do it now while it's fresh in my brain. And I laugh because that's what I say to him all the time. Do it. Don't lay there. Yeah, I'm going to do that later. Do it. It's fresh in your brain now. Get it done. Then lay back down and do what you. And I smiled and laughed at that. But again, with that stuff with your son in the car, there's all these moments of parenting that it's difficult to be a parent. I'm going to lighten it up a bit here because something disgustingly hilarious happened when my son was probably in grade 1. Now, I'll set the scene. He's in grade 1, my middle daughter's in about grade 6, and they're both upstairs. She's in her room and has all day been wondering what she's going to take to school for show and share. It was a dilemma we've suggested as parents. Now, the kid's mother and I are downstairs. My son is upstairs sitting down on the toilet, and we hear this scream come from upstairs. And I went running up. I thought there was a snake up there or something. What happened? What happened? What happened? My son, she was in her room saying, what am I going to take? What am I going to take? And my son finished doing what he was doing and wiped himself and then walked into her room with the toilet paper and said, why don't you take that to show and share? And she said it to me, that's what he did. And I looked at him and said, did you do that? And he said, yeah. And I'm trying to keep a straight face.
He's grade 1?
He's in grade 1, just out of kindy. He's a little kid. I said, why in the world would you do that? And he said to me, honestly, I thought it would be funny, like comedy. And it was. And as a parent, my wife comes up saying, what happened? I said, well, he walked out of the toilet.
That's terrible.
With this in his hand and told his sister, why don't you take that to show and share? She's trying not to laugh, looking at me going, how are you going to deal with this? And I'm trying not to laugh. And I said, mate, I get how you can see that's funny. Deep in my head, I'm thinking it's hilarious. But you don't do that to your sister, and you don't do that. You sit back down, and we went downstairs and we cracked up going, oh my God, there's one for his 21st in years to come.
That's
well,
great. It's
already out in the world now. But as a parent, you've got to deal with kids coming at you from all these different angles.
Oh, all the time.
And how are you going to deal with that?
Yeah.
I thought it was funny, like comedy. Yeah, actually, that's. I love your sense of humour, son, but some people don't find that funny.
Do you have moments? I'm sure every parent's had it, where you might go through an experience with a parent, and you say to yourself, "I'm never going to do it like you've done it. The way you spoke to me today, I'll never do that when I'm a father. I'll never do that when I'm a parent." And then you have those moments, years, decades later, where you hear yourself and go, "Wow."
Yeah.
You sound like your mother. Oh, you just sounded like your father.
Yeah.
And you hear the echoes of your childhood coming through your adulthood and go, you're in there still.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a negative thing all the time either, but you catch yourself, positive and negative, and go, I am also the sum of my environment and my experiences. And I can hear the echoes of my past coming through me, speaking to you. And if you're aware enough, you can catch it. And if you think it could be better, you can also make it better.
Yeah. Well, I've had these conversations that we're having now, I've had with my kids.
Yeah.
I've told my kids about my upbringing. I've told them everything. Nothing is new to my kids here.
Yeah.
And I have even told them exactly what we're saying. I want to make sure I do things right, and that I don't come at you, if I'm angry or whatever, in a way that my mother or my father would have. That's now come round to haunt me years later, especially with my middle girl, who will stop me when I'm trying to explain something to her that I'm not happy with or whatever, and will use it. She'll go, you're starting to sound like Nanny now. And she'll check me on it, check. And I go, okay, woo. So she'll probably listening to what I'm saying is right, and it's against what her wishes for this or that. I don't want this, but no, we're going to do it this. But no, you're only 16. You're starting to. She'll pull it on me.
And
very wise.
When she does pull it, is she right?
Well, it puts me on the back foot straight away.
Yeah, right.
So she knows she can.
Do you hear it?
I play it back in my head and think, okay, am I? Do I? Probably. I'm unaware of this.
Yeah.
No doubt, yes, I am, in a strange way. So it's good. It's good that we all know it. And then again, these three are going to one day be parents.
And we are their stories.
And I'm certain they're going to go, hey, Dad taught me this.
Yeah.
Mum taught me this.
They taught me, even though they didn't know they were teaching it to me.
Yeah.
But I observed it.
Yeah.
So, because you're always on show.
Yeah.
And that's the burden of parenting too. You are always on show. They're taking in everything. The way you handle stress, the way you handle grief. And maybe that's a place to go to as we come to the end of talking, because neither of us are sitting here pretending to be psychologists or talking about this subject with a formal education behind us around the art of doing it. It's just two guys,
Yeah.
But the saying goodbye part of it is an interesting thing too, because I think if we've been talking about the fact that your parents have come from a journey where they are the sum of their experiences, their environment. They will do the best they can do with the knowledge they have, however limited it might be, as parents themselves. Sometimes they're unconsciously maybe doing things that you would think are harmful, but they're not even aware. As you age then and try and make peace and reconcile with all of that, hopefully while they're still in the world, there's the inevitability of death.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter how prepared you think you might be for it, when that moment comes where you are the person saying goodbye to a loved one or to a parent specifically, again, just like everything we've talked about, there's no handbook that prepares you.
No.
Okay, here's what that grief is like, and here's how you will do the following things to manage through it. We both lost our dads, I think, almost a year apart in the last couple of years. And that experience was transformative for me. And I know in its own way it's been that for you. When you get to the point where you know that person is going to leave the earth and there is a ticking clock on it, how did you approach that when you had a sense of that? Not that you had a date given, but you had a sense of this feels like we might not have much time. What did that do to you?
I felt, in a strange way, lucky and blessed.
That you had that bit of a heads up.
Because, my father, as I said, my father dealt with a lot of grief being in the police. And then I myself, many, many years later, for 1 year of my life, did join the police. In a way to follow in Dad's footsteps, but I was 45 years of age and the job wasn't me. But again, I saw a lot of what Dad saw. And I saw a lot of grief and a lot of death and a lot of people who obviously aren't prepared for it because it's sudden. I felt lucky that he'd lived a full life. He'd got to know his grandkids and we were nearing that end for him. Tragedy hits a lot of people. And people suffer with a lot of tremendous grief, and everybody deals with it differently. But Dad was at an age where he had dementia. It was getting worse and worse, and then one simple medical problem turned everything around, and 24 hours later he was gone.
Just to go back a bit, if it's okay, and tell me if it gets uncomfortable, but if you go back, could you... And I didn't have to go through this because Dad's death was much more sudden by its nature. But there were early signs of dementia coming in. Not to the extent that your dad had by the time he got to the end of his life. But were you getting time out, enough signals to know the man that I knew is fading?
Yes.
And were you able to be present of mind enough to know, while I know he's fading, I need to be present, I need to be in the moment with him? Or was it...
It was difficult because, I saw his dementia get worse and worse and worse, and I spoke with my sisters and I said early in the year, I don't see him making Christmas. So visiting someone who has dementia, he would recognise me, you would say the odd question. It got very bad at the end, so became the answer a lot. Did you watch the footy last night? Yeah. Did you see so-and-so play? Yeah.
There's nothing much else.
No. Who's your favourite player? Yeah. So there's nothing happening here. It was getting that bad. So you're there for you to spend. You'd leave by the time you turned your back. He's forgotten you were there.
Right.
So that was difficult.
Because you're already grieving then, because Dad's gone or
He's
going.
Gone. I remember him now as not as that person.
Yeah.
That wasn't Dad.
Yeah.
I think of my father now as the fit big man going for walks with the dog and going fishing and stuff like that. Very funny. So, but I've processed it. And I knew at the time, I'm not going to remember you like this. This is not you. He was fading into to nothing. And then, we did have one call happen and something happened to him, and they said it was nothing to do with the dementia, it was a twisted bowel. And 12 hours later he'd passed on. I was lucky enough to be there with him at the time, so telling him it was okay. But as I say, I've witnessed many times when I've had to knock on a door and tell a parent their son has passed away. So that they're not prepared for that.
Yeah.
Your 18-year-old son. That was horrific thing to do. Another reason why I don't do that job. I could never do that job. And I've got a lot of respect for people in that job. But that was just horrific. And I think, well, we're all ticking, and you realise that at different times in your life. But it's just being
Can I tell you this?
aware.
There was something I read recently, we've talked about it, I can't remember where I came across it, and it was a quote that said, "The boy becomes the man after the boy buries the father." And I remember reading that and going, whoa, it's heavy to think about that. But I remember there's also something in that, I think, because I can say that there's the guy I was before Dad passed and the guy I've been becoming since he left. It happened in a year when I was turning 50, had all these milestones, as you know, turning 50. He had just had his birthday, and on the night of his birthday he fell, and the fall was pretty significant. He'd broken several ribs at the back of the rib cage, had shattered and torn the lung, and I went and saw him in hospital, and he passed at 2:45 the next morning. 3-4 months later, I had this realisation that none of us are getting out alive. None of us. And if you were handed a multiple choice questionnaire at the age of 20, for example, and you can pick how to go out, and it's multiple choice, you can't pick, and I know we've talked about this before also, but to share it here, you can't pick none of the above. You have to pick A, B or C. And A might be a shocking accident, and B might be a terrible illness that's gradual, and C might be you pain-free fall asleep with the people that you love most in the world by your side, never to wake up. We'd all pick C. We'd all pick C. We'd all probably like to pick, can I pick none of the above? But that's not an option. And as I said to my brother and my mum months later when we were talking about Dad, and I said, you know what, I've come to understand that it was perfect. That in spite of how we got there, it was a perfect way to exit with two people that love you either side of you telling you it's okay. The grief, if you allow it, I think becomes gratitude, and the gratitude becomes richer. And the gratitude for the fact that I had this many years with you, and the gratitude that nothing was left unsaid. We both knew we loved each other. What more can you ask for?
Yeah, a lot of people don't get any
They
of that.
don't get any of
They
that.
don't get any of that.
How many people have lost people suddenly and not been there and never had a chance to make peace?
And the poor parents who are burying the kids.
Absolutely.
What lessons there for
Absolutely. But I think for me there was this understanding that grief, if we allow it, to my understanding, can move into gratitude for the things that are there to be grateful for.
them? Absolutely.
Hey, I want to ask you something, but as we wrap up, have a think about this. I heard a guy speak in my 20s and it stuck with me. And he asked everyone in the room to do a little bit of a mind experiment. And he said, just imagine your funeral, okay? Because none of us are getting out alive. So let's imagine what that funeral looks like. Who's there? Just imagine it. Now, what are they saying? Just imagine it. And he would say then, are they saying, he had nice clothes. I really liked the watches he would wear. He loved his house. Or are they saying, let me tell you about the difference this person made in my life by just being here? Been good to sit down and talk to you, mate. I know it's a broad subject, and we're probably out of time, but D&M, maybe in the coming episode we'll lighten the tone completely and go, what did you say, dumb and meaningless? Maybe we do that. Wherever you are, thanks for taking time out to tune in, and hopefully we'll catch you on the next one.
Talk to you soon.